topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Churchill said, "Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it." Kevin Hallinan believes that certainly applies to business. Welcome to Winning Business Radio, here at W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. And now, your host, Kevin Hallinan.
Thanks for joining in today, everybody. I'm Kevin Hallinan, and welcome back to Winning Business Radio on W4CY.com. Now Winning Business TV live streaming on Talk4TV.com. In addition to Facebook at Winning Business Radio, as well as on many other platforms, including YouTube. The mission of Winning Business Radio, as regular listeners know, is to offer insights and advice to help people avoid the mistakes of others, right? To learn best practices, the how-tos, the what-tos, the what-not-tos, to be challenged and certainly and hopefully to be inspired by the successes of others. But, you know, virtually every successful person that I've ever had a chance to talk to has had some form of failure in their lives and careers. So I say it every week, while we all have to get our knees skinned once in a while, I'm driven to keep those scrapes from needing major surgery. Let's endeavor to learn from history so we don't repeat it. Today, my guest is David Sawyer, founder and president of Safer Places Incorporated. Here's his bio. David Sawyer is a career security professional. In fact, he holds the designation of CPP, or Certified Protection Professional. He began his career in 1977 working for Wynn Residential, and over 22 years became their VP of Security. He then spent 4 years with Longwood Security as Senior VP Administration, and in 2004 founded Safer Places. He studied psychology at Salem State University and now lives in Sebago, Maine with his wife of 44 years, Patty. They have 3 grown children, a son and daughter in Massachusetts, a son in the Chicago area, and I'm going to know this soon at the end of April, he's got 4 grandkids. We get the first on the way. David, welcome to Winning Business Radio, Winning Business TV.
Well, thanks for having me, Kevin. Great to be here.
Oh, that's awesome. So let's start with the most important people. Tell us about Patty.
Well, Patty and I met actually in junior high school,
Wow.
7th grade music class. And and I remember she tells the story that somebody else in the class said, "You know, that boy over there likes you." And her response was, "Ew." Fortunately, things progressed better than that afterwards.
That's fantastic. Tell us about your kids. What do they do?
Well, my oldest son, Eric, lives out in the Chicago area, and he heads up the IT department for Lou Malnati's Pizza. And so every once in a while, I have to call him because they ship nationwide, worldwide, I think. Wow. So I have to call him and ask for his employee discount every once in a while. Love the Chicago deep dish pizza.
Yeah, me too.
My son, Brian, works for me. He's the VP at Safer Places. And my daughter, Caitlin, lives in Massachusetts, and she is a school teacher, high school math teacher.
Oh, wow. That's a tough place to be, even though I'm sure it's still gets a lot of rewards, but it's been harder on those guys for sure.
Well, she was able to make the transition to all the remote learning that everybody was required to do because she actually transitioned to that just prior to the pandemic. She was teaching. It's part of the public school system, but it was completely online. So they went to that early.
That's good.
That made it a lot easier for her. Yeah.
All right, let's start with your background. I always like listeners and viewers to kind of get a sense as to where you came from, where a person came from. So where'd you grow up and what were your early interests?
Well, I guess I'll start. I mean, we moved around a little bit. I spent a little time in Connecticut, a little time in the Newburgh, New York area. But I'd say that most of my growing up was in East Bridgewater, Massachusetts.
Sure.
Went to junior high, met my wife there, graduated from high school there. And I think an early indication that I was going to become an entrepreneur was asking my grandfather, who was a printer, to print me up tickets to a car wash. So I was probably in the 5th or 6th grade, and he printed me up these tickets. I went door to door, sold them for, I don't know, $1 or $2, I guess.
Yeah.
And people could come to my house and redeem the tickets for a car wash. So that was my first foray into being an entrepreneur.
Really good margins.
So labor was cheap. So
yeah, supplies almost 100% margin right there.
Yeah. Mom and Dad were good enough to not charge
Donate.
me for the water and the fun.
Yeah, that's right. Soap was an additional upcharge. No, just kidding. So what drew you to a career in security?
I just
or was it more real estate at the time and it became security? Or
no, it was. I always wanted to be a cop, I guess, and so I figured that was a good path. Start with private security and move my way into public law enforcement.
Right.
The closest I got was I was on the Brookline, Massachusetts Auxiliary Police for a couple of years, and they assign you to do parade duty, and you get to drive a patrol car around town and check the schools, and you'd get the call to pick up lunch for the prisoners at Subway, but that was about as exciting as that got.
As an auxiliary cop, were you armed?
No, and we went to an academy, but it was an abbreviated academy. They didn't do the firearm training, so we were not armed. And I remember once walking around a schoolyard, and most of the time people didn't notice, but this one kid said, "Hey, you don't have a gun." And I just looked at him with steely eyes, and I said, "Do I look like I need a gun?"
Nice.
So. And he just shook his head and walked away. So
you didn't buy it?
Nah, probably not.
All right. Tell us about Win Residential. Very successful company, a lot of properties. Tell us about the company for those that don't know, because this is a very broad audience, and then how your roles changed over 22 years.
Well, I started out there as a security guard while I was going to Salem State College. Mm-hmm. It was supposed to be just a short-term temporary job, and turned into a long 20+ year career. But Win Residential is one of the largest in the country. They manage mostly residential properties, and I forget how many states now, but over 25 states, I think, that they're in. I worked my way up through the ranks and became their VP of security. So I oversaw all things security, from training of staff to contracts with guard companies and installation of camera systems and all that.
I'm sure things changed over that 22 years. What were some of the biggest challenges you saw?
Well, I think some of the Win started doing primarily subsidized or low income or affordable housing, I guess is the correct way to say that now. Mm-hmm. And so they're in some pretty tough neighborhoods sometimes, and they also didn't have a huge budget sometimes. So having to be creative with not a lot of resources was probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah. What would you say? I always like this question because I never know what answers we're going to get, but they're always entertaining. What were a couple of the key lessons or key takeaways over that 22 years? You can think back and say, man, I definitely learned this lesson, or I've taken that forward.
Wow, that's a tough one. I guess I'll go back to the, trying to make do with few resources. And I learned, I think, that it isn't always technology, even though you may have that at your disposal. That isn't always the best solution. So I remember one example, property in a downtown suburban area, and a lot of homeless guys would come and they would sit on the wall in front of this complex, and it doesn't give the complex a good look to have that, these guys out there. They'd harass people as they were walking by, and sometimes bother the residents of the complex. So the task was, can we, get them to move? And so, you ask the security guards to move them along. You put cameras on that area, and nothing seemed to do the trick. In the end, the solution was to ask the maintenance guys to move the sprinklers. And when they said, we turn the sprinklers on. So
that's not bad. That's pretty good. Ingenuity, right?
Yeah.
All right. Then you left, let's see, you were 4 years at Longwood Security.
So
Tell me about that move. Yeah.
yeah. So that Longwood is a contract guard and patrol company, regional in New England, and so I went there just because they were kind of the higher end security guard company, and had a great reputation, and I learned an awful lot during my time there. Oversaw the administrative part of the business, HR and that sort of thing. That was a good learning curve. If I back up a little bit, when I was with Win, we started doing what I do now, background checks in-house. So that was before there were a lot of background screening companies. And so I teamed up with the HR department, and we were kind of an early adopter of kind of realizing that we were hiring people like maintenance guys that, you give a master key to the apartment complex, and we didn't really know a lot about them. So we started doing background checks in-house. I worked with the HR department. When I left, I went to Longwood, and one of the first things I did there was start a background screening division, and Win was my first customer. So we kept doing it. It wasn't in-house anymore, but we kept doing it.
Yeah, you're giving the keys to the kingdom out. You don't know where somebody's come from, what their background is, and what risks they bring. It's all about risk management, right?
It is. And for the most part, we didn't, when we started doing the background checks, we did it on some of the existing people, and we didn't have too many surprises. There was, one or two that were like, now what do we do? Person already works here, and they had kind of a shady background, but you overcome those things on a one-on-one basis.
What talk about the decision to start Safer Places? You're at very stable companies. Longwood, very stable, been around a long time, very successful. What was behind that decision to leave and scratch that entrepreneurial itch, if you will?
Well, it just was a lifelong dream, and I think I just got to the point where it was going to be, it's now or never.
Yeah.
And I was able to go to my boss at Longwood, tell him what I wanted to do. He tried to talk me out of it at first, but in the end, I had his blessing. And he decided that if I left that background screening division that I had started, he wasn't going to continue it. So he was okay with me taking it with me. So that really was the safety net, I think, that I needed to be able to get started on my own. Still pretty scary.
Yeah.
But it was nice to have, be able to go and, be out in the open about it and go to these customers and say, here's what I'm thinking. Would you come with me if I did this? And got some pretty positive responses. So that made it a little easier.
What were some of the, just last question before we go to the first break, what as you recall, was maybe one of the toughest challenges to that whole thing? You had some revenue right away, right?
And that helps. But, really it was on a shoestring. So you have financial issues, not a lot of backing there. And now starting to grow it with, without a lot of experience of doing things on my own at that scale. So there was a lot of, learning as you go.
Some of the best education I've found. All right, we're going to take our first break, David. Everybody, we'll be back in just a couple of minutes with David Sawyer, founder and president of Safer Places Incorporated. Be right back.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
Hey everyone, I'm Jimmy Star, the king of cool and your host of the Jimmy Star Show, the entertainment radio show for all you cool and unique people looking to get a behind-the-scenes peek at what's going on in the entertainment industry. Listen in as me and my cool crowd of co-hosts bring you celebrity guests, new music, and the good times in fashion, entertainment, and pop culture. Right, everybody? Right! Tune in live Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on W4CY.com.
Hey, this is Kenny Wayne Shepherd, and you're listening to W4CY Radio.
Hey, this is Rebel Medler. Join me for In Your Face on W4CY.com, Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Bestgen Wealth Management is a second-generation, family-owned financial planning and wealth advisory firm. In addition to coordinating complex business and personal planning needs, our firm takes a sincere interest in your well-being and personal values. Find us at bestgenwm.com. That's bestgenwm.com, where we consider all our clients an extension of our family. Advisory services offered through Commonwealth Financial Network, a registered investment advisor.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind, to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
Welcome back. We are here with David Sawyer, founder and president of Safer Places Incorporated. David, describe the company for everybody.
Well, when I started it was one company. I have since kind of divided that into two on paper anyway. We market both under the Safer Places banner.
Right.
So we have on the one side the background screening side, and then we also have a security consulting division. And when I started the company, the model was to do what I did when I was with Win. So I was there vice president of security. So anytime there was any kind of security issue, whether it was, consulting on something or we were doing the background checks, all that was kind of rolled into one job description. So that's what I offered. And when the background screening grew pretty quickly, that was probably the easier of the two to grow.
Yeah.
The consulting took a little longer to get some traction. And when it did, I found that I had kind of taken my eye off the ball with the technology, because I was focused on the background screening. And you know how fast technology changes.
Oh, yeah.
You take your eye off for a minute and you're lost. So at that point, I decided to start a separate company. I brought in a partner just for the security consulting side. And we started a separate business. And my partner, Steve, has helped that really flourish and really brought that company back to life. And he's the technology guru these days. I defer to him on all things technology.
So tell us about the services that you provide. I know some of them are unique to what you guys do. So, yeah, what we try to do is with the background screening is develop a screening package or packages for the positions for which a company hires. So a lot of companies have these set packages, they'll call it the warehouse package or the driver package or something. We try to customize it for each one, and we go over all the possibilities of what could be included and the pros and the cons with a potential customer, and we kind of let them put together their own package. So, everybody wants it to include criminal, so you want to find out if there's any criminal records. But what people don't understand often is that there are so many different ways and so many different levels to get at criminal records that's almost like a separate category in and of itself. Do you want to search at the county level, the state level? We have national databases that we search. The federal courts keep their own records. So if you don't search at the federal level, you could miss something there. So we go over all that. And then, the usual things, driving records, credit reports, previous employment. Credit reports too.
What's that?
Credit reports too. Yeah.
So the trend has been kind of moving away from credit reports to be included in all background checks. It used to be probably, I'd say 75% or more. Now it's much less than half, probably 25-30%. In some states have actually said you can't use a credit report in employment screening unless there's a nexus to the job. So if you're the CFO or something. So that's, in my estimation, it's kind of unfortunate because the credit report has some other information in it that could be useful, like your previous job. It's kind of the best way, really, to find out if somebody's hiding another job. You look at their credit report.
Interesting, yeah.
You find out that they applied for a car loan when they worked for XYZ company. Well, then it shows up on the credit report. And if they didn't tell you about that, then obviously you're asking them why.
And I would think that there's probably a science or an art, rather, of reading those reports, in that you can see red flags that might indicate somebody could be prone to a certain behavior. No.
Yeah, I mean, with the credit, the old adage used to be, if you were living beyond your means, then maybe you had a higher propensity to steal from the company because, if I'm offering you a $50,000 salary and I see that you've got $1 million mortgage, then I know, something
right.
doesn't add up there.
So who is your typical customer? It sounds like they're nationwide.
Yep, we do work nationwide. And, it's hard to say that we work in so many different verticals. I mean, anybody with employees, really. And each one's a little different. If you're running a trucking firm, then you have to be concerned with DOT regulations and doing the drug testing and alcohol and DOT physicals. And, we offer all of that just to make it easy for the client to hire. And then we also offer continuous screening or revisiting.
That was my next question. A driver or somebody like that, they have to, I don't know the frequency, but it sounds like there's probably regular testing, annual or something.
There is, if they're DOT regulated, basically the trucks and the buses, then it's prescribed by the Department of Transportation. But a lot of our customers, where they're not DOT regulated, still they want to do either an annual or semi-annual driving record check. Just because they know they have liability. I mean, if the guy's out there and he got his license suspended last week, and you don't know about that, you've got a liability issue there. So some do it periodically, and some do continuous monitoring, so that if you get a speeding ticket or a DUI, then with continuous monitoring, that pops up pretty quickly, and within a day or so usually, and so you can, if you're not waiting 6 months, then to do a recheck.
How did the lack of background checks or the lack of this type of screening impact insurance rates, for example?
Well, used to be, and I don't really know how the insurance companies are handling this now, but it used to be that a lot of the insurance agents would do the driving checks for clients. So I'd ask a client, do you want to add in driving records? And they'd say, oh, no, my insurance company does that for me. I don't hear that anymore. So I'm guessing that the insurance companies have figured out that's an expense that they can just pass on and let the employer do it, because I don't hear that anymore.
So let me cover some verticals here. You work with landlords, property managers, those apartment buildings, companies that hire anybody, but specifically drivers, backgrounds, drug testing. What are some of the other verticals you service?
Manufacturing, product deliveries. We have a couple of companies that own some pizza franchises, and they hire hundreds of drivers to deliver pizza.
Oh yeah.
So they're not doing so much a comprehensive background check, but they're very interested in that driving record, and they certainly want to make sure that they're not on the sex offender registry list, that they're not sending someone to deliver pizza into someone's home that is dangerous. So they're doing that.
Now, how do some of those background checks differ from, say, Corey checks? Had been for many years a football coach, youth football coach, Pop Warner. I've been in numerous nonprofit kind of volunteer positions. Many of them do a Corey check. What's different between Corey and what you might do?
Yeah, so for people that aren't in Massachusetts, Corey stands for Criminal Offender Record Information, and CORI. And that is a Massachusetts statewide search for criminal records, but it's only Massachusetts records. And each state has its own way of searching records. Corey just happens to be the way that Massachusetts has.
Version. Okay.
It's not the only way to do it in Massachusetts. You can go into the individual courts at the county level and search, but we recommend Corey, so we make that a part of a background check that we're doing in Massachusetts. But it's important to note too that not just if the company's in Massachusetts. So I could be working with a company in Pennsylvania, and if we look at the subject that they're hiring and we see that they used to live in Massachusetts, then we're going to recommend that we do a Corey search so that we're covering where they used to live.
So you have access to 50 different databases or 50 different systems covering each state, depending on where.
And it's actually more than that, because some states have different ways of going about it, different regulations. Some states don't have a statewide repository that they make available.
Interesting.
California is a good example of that, and you have to search at the county level. It's the only way to do it. So you start off with what we call a social tracker, and we put in the social security number. That gives us a list of addresses and names associated with the social. So that is kind of a pointer for us to tell us where we should be looking for potential criminal records. With the theory being, if you have a criminal record, it's probably going to be someplace where you've resided or close by.
So the employee or potential employee has to consent?
Oh, yeah. When you're doing background screening for employment purposes, the Fair Credit Reporting Act kicks in, and there's a whole list of things that you have to comply with, and consent. Actually, there's actually two separate forms: a disclosure form and an authorization form. Both have to be signed by the individual.
All right, let's talk about, we have about 2 minutes before our next break. Talk about social media screening.
Well, that is probably the fastest growing area of background screening right now. And I think, well, I don't just think it, I've seen studies and polls that have been done on it. A very high percentage of HR folks will tell you that they will Google somebody, or they'll check their Facebook page or something.
Right.
And the reason that's the experts say that's not a great idea for them to do that on their own is that they are also going to see things that they can't use in a hiring decision. So what do you do if you go to someone's Facebook page and you see that they are have this exciting post that they just found out that they're expecting their first child?
Ooh.
And then you don't hire them, maybe for different reasons.
Yeah.
But how do you prove that it wasn't because of the child that they're expecting? So you can get yourself into hot water by doing that. Any protected things like religion or sexual orientation, or all those stuff. That stuff is on social media. So if you have a professional company doing it, first of all, we can do it a lot faster because we're using artificial intelligence, and we do have a human review part of it as well. But we can search more platforms much faster, and we can redact all that stuff that you don't want to see, and just filter out the things and report the things that would be actionable. Somebody that's online bullying, for example. You wouldn't believe, maybe you would, but some of the things that we see, people actually bragging that they spent last weekend shoplifting and didn't get caught.
Oh, my word.
So
celebrating the first lift of a drink after 10 years in the slammer.
So you don't know what you'll find. And
that's crazy.
So it's something that employers are very interested in, but they just need to be careful in how they go about it.
All right, we'll come back. I want to talk more about these issues these areas right here. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes with David Sawyer.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
Have you ever dreamed of having your own radio show? Well, W4CY Radio makes dreams come true. You can be a radio personality on the #1 ranked internet radio station in West Palm Beach, Florida. We can be heard in 105 countries and all U.S. states. Promote your business, earn up to $10,000 per month and more. It's all up to you. Have fun and be heard. Call 561-506-4031. That's 561-506-4031. Start your radio show now.
Hey, this is Rebel Medler. Join me for In Your Face on W4CY.com, Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Bestgen Wealth Management is a second-generation, family-owned financial planning and wealth advisory firm. In addition to coordinating complex business and personal planning needs, our firm takes a sincere interest in your well-being and personal values. Find us at bestgenwm.com. That's bestgenwm.com, where we consider all our clients an extension of our family. Advisory services offered through Commonwealth Financial Network, a registered investment advisor.
Hey, this is Johnny Three Tears from Hollywood Undead, and you're listening to W4CY Radio.
I do whatever it takes to make it break through. Anything I'm face to face with, it's true.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind, to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
Welcome back with David Sawyer, founder and president, of Safer Places Incorporated. David, you do a lot in real estate, it looks like, or residential. There's a bullet here talking about eviction avoidance, better tenant screening. Makes sense. Talk about that.
Well, yeah, and again, I was just thinking of an example why it's important to understand where the data that you're looking at comes from. I had a client that was doing some tenant screening. Good credit report came back. Previous landlord they checked with, everything was great. They didn't do a search for previous evictions, and turned out to be the tenant from HE double hockey sticks. And he spent a lot of money evicting, and found out during the course of that he was not the first one to evict this person. When you're putting together those screening packages, if you're just thinking, okay, I just want to make sure they can pay the rent, and so you do the credit check, which most landlords want to do. If you leave it there, or maybe you add in a criminal record. I don't know whether she had a criminal record or not, but maybe she didn't. But the eviction, the history was there. So the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior.
And can a small homeowner or landlord, rather, let's say it's a side-by-side, they're renting the other side, can they access your services being that small of a customer?
Yeah, we do have a service for them. It's actually TransUnion is the credit bureau that we use for credit reports. And they have, it's a kind of a long story, but to get approved with us as a client, to get access to credit reports, you do have to go through a little bit of vetting. The credit bureaus require it. And a lot of home-based businesses they're not able to pass that inspection. But TransUnion does have a way to do it, and we have a link on our website that helps people do that for the small landlord. It's it's called Smart Move, and before that we had to turn away the small landlord, but now we're able to help them.
All right, let's see. All right, here's a question that I had as I was preparing for this. It's really difficult in many industries, in a lot of industries, to hire good people from the get-go, right? Pandemics made it that much more challenging. Does this make it even harder for a potential employer to hire somebody good? Or is it just the right thing to do regardless?
Well, I actually like that question, because my argument would be that it is just the right thing to do, because if you think about, and we're going through the same thing. We're having Safer Places is having the same trouble hiring people and retaining them. So we understand the struggle. But I would never think of hiring somebody without going through the drug test and the background screening, because it's just going to cause that much more heartache down the line if you end up with the wrong person. But what I do see as a trend right now is a lot more employers are willing to take a second look at somebody that they might have just dismissed out of hand in the past. And the EEOC, or the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, has long held that they want you to do that. They want you to take a second look. They don't want you to say, oh, he's got a felony conviction, so right off the bat, you're done. So they have they suggest a tool for that, and it's called an individualized assessment. And we actually offer that. I think that is another thing that makes Safer Places unique. We offer to do this for our clients if they would like us to. And so a record comes back. We're done with the background check, and some kind of criminal conviction has shown up. So with an individualized assessment, we go to a next step. We do a telephone interview with the person, and we say, you were convicted of shoplifting 4 years ago. Tell me about that. First of all, is it accurate? They usually yes, and we'll say, well, tell me what were the circumstances around that? Maybe what led to that? What have you done since then that would show an employer that you've grown from that and you're not going to do that again?
Yeah.
Have you done anything to rehabilitate yourself? And that can be, someone with a drug or alcohol problem going to rehab. It could be just, more education, and any number of things that they've done. Maybe the crime was something to do with assault and battery, and they've gone to anger management classes. So they can show that they've done things to rehabilitate themselves. And employers now, more of them are having us do these individualized assessments because they want to know not just what was in the background check, but they want to know the reason behind it and the circumstances surrounding it. And it helps them get a more full picture of what that this person is about, and helps them make a more informed decision.
Yeah, I can think of a scenario where I can envision a scenario at least where the background doesn't pass the eyeball test. I know we can all be deceived from time to time, but, they're sitting with somebody, maybe they just feel good about them. They've answered the questions properly. Maybe it was referred by someone they know. The background doesn't line up with the person they see sitting in front of them. Right? Like they wouldn't want that held against them.
Well, yeah. And I had a great example of that. Yeah. Fairly young guy in interstate, I forget the exact charge, interstate trafficking of firearms. And turns out, after we interviewed him, and we verified all this, of course, but he was convicted of it, but he was helping his grandfather move out of his house and go into senior housing.
Yeah.
And the grandfather had a gun collection up in the attic, and he gave it to the grandson and said, here, and it was in the trunk of his car when he got pulled over. So that sounds like a horrible crime.
Right.
And most people at first blush would say, I'm not hiring that person. But when you find out the rest of the story, I believe he ended up getting that job.
Talk about I know you have a number of horror stories. Talk about some of the biggest mistakes you've seen people make, and then talk about how they can avoid them.
Well, actually, this one is not so much a mistake as it's a good example of how doing a background check is not just push a button and the background check is done. It's like putting together the pieces of a puzzle. And so I mentioned earlier, there's different ways to get at criminal records. There are ancillary benefits to, like I mentioned, with the credit. You sometimes find out previous employment. Sometimes with a driving record, you find out that somebody had a DUI, or sometimes even a drug-related offense and got their license suspended because of it.
Oh, yeah.
And it turns out that was the only way we found out about the criminal record. So we had one where a guy showed up on a sex offender registry, and he was going for a very high-level position, and he was moving from one state to another to take this job. And I think it was a vice president or something in that range. And anyway, we found sex, and we thought, no, this can't be right. It must be just someone with a similar name. And we called him up, and he said, well, yeah, all right, I admit it. I was on the sex offender registry list. And we said, well, can you tell us, what led to that? And he told us a story about how he was in college and he was at a party, and he had too much to drink, and he just ended up using the outdoors as a bathroom. And somebody saw him, so he got charged with indecent exposure, and that led to his being on the sex offender registry. Wow. So we told this to the client, and they said, "Gee, he's very qualified. We really liked him. We're probably going to hire him anyway." And I said, "Okay, but before you make the decision, why don't you let us verify that story? So it's going to take a little time, but can you give us a little time?" So the initial criminal record check didn't show any criminal records. So we were surprised when we found the sex offender registry search. So it turns out that he was convicted. It was in the county where he was convicted. They only allow us to see records back going, I think it was 10 years. And this happened prior to that, but he was still on the sex offender registry. So if the client had not done a search of the National Sex Offender Registry, never would have known this, would have completely missed the charge. And it turns out he was lying about why he was convicted. He actually was convicted of sexual assault on a child.
Oh, my word.
So that was it's a great example of why, just doing the basics sometimes it isn't enough. And if you look at all the different pieces that are available to you and you put it together, you get the full picture sometimes.
So do you have investigators on your team, or is this mostly done through technology? Type of background?
Well, it's mostly technology, although we do still have to have court runners, researchers to go into the courts. Even in states like Massachusetts where there's Corey, so that's done electronically.
Right.
But we have one recently where there was a couple of convictions on the Corey, and the person called us and said, this isn't accurate. Yes, I was charged with these things, but I've never been to court. I think they were dismissed. I'm not sure. So now we've got to we got to go to the original source. Corey is just a database.
Right.
We got to go now to the original source, to that courthouse, and pull those actual court files to be able to determine if he's accurate in that the Corey is inaccurate.
So the folks that would go out there, they're outsourced, they're independent entities.
Yep. There are companies that that specialize in that and train court researchers, and we contract with them.
Those people must have a lot of patience.
Well, it's gotten so difficult for them because
courts are closed. Yeah.
Some courts are closed. Some of them, they have public access terminals that the researchers can go in and sit at, but because they've had to space them further apart now, so there are fewer of them, and they limit the time that they can spend on them, and it's really gotten very difficult for some.
So, how big is your team, and are there specialties within your within the folks that you hire?
We're a pretty small company. So we have myself and my son is vice president. Then we have a couple of operations people, we call them, in the office, and a bookkeeper. But that's about it.
Wow.
And so
lean operation. That's good.
It really is. Yeah. And we rely very heavily on the technology to help us with that. But it still requires, like those individualized assessments. It still requires, a lot of labor, hands-on type of handling.
And so no sales team, which is interesting. Are you and Brian doing the selling? Does it come organically after all these years? What does that look like? How do your clients come to you?
Most of them are either through networking or referrals from existing clients. Yeah, I've never, that's if I came across the right salesperson, I'd probably scoop them up. But we've tried a couple of times, and it just, I think the growth has been slow, but it's been steady.
Right.
And it's a lot less risk doing it that way too. Salespeople, the good ones, are expensive.
They are. How much time in a hiring process does a well-done background check add? Or does it?
Well, we say in our marketing that the background check can be done in 1 to 3 business days. So, submit the background check to us on Monday, and, could be done Tuesday, but, maybe Thursday at the latest. there are, and I would say over 90% of them will fit that 1 to 3 business days. Where we stumble up on that sometimes is if there's a drug test included and the person doesn't go to take the test right away, or if they're positive, then it has to go through an MRO, which is a medical review officer, who has to contact the person and make sure it wasn't a prescription that caused the positive test result. So that can add a little time. And probably the one that is the biggest stumbling block for us is verifying previous employment. Especially now with people working from home a lot, a lot of that is just, it's telephone work.
Right.
It's getting on the phone and saying, did John Smith used to work for you, and did he hold this title and these dates? And you leave messages, and if they don't call you back, you just keep calling. So is reference checking something you do as a regular, whether it's part of another service, or do you offer that as a standalone? No, it's part. It could be a standalone, but it's usually part of a more comprehensive background check. Who in the listening audience do you think should reach out to you with questions, and why? I guess any employer, especially someone in an HR department, that doesn't know where their background check information is coming from. Someone who says, "Gee, I do all these background checks and I almost never see any criminal records." I've had so many different clients that have fallen into that trap once they've come to us. A couple I can think of where they've told us of a rehire. So they've rehired somebody since coming on board with us. We do the background check, and we find a felony conviction, and they say, "Hey, I hired this guy 2 years ago. He's a rehire, but I was using a different company back then, and they didn't give us the felony. We didn't know." They come back with a clean record. So there are telltale signs that could be an issue. And one of them is if all of your background checks are coming back instantly or within a few hours, there are some where that can happen, and there's still a good and effective background screening. But for the most part, if you're getting them that quickly, that probably the company is relying on database information only, and they're not doing the real research, and you probably are missing criminal records. That's a great point. What's the best way for people to contact you if they have questions about anything we've talked about? I know we had the crawl showing your website, your email address, I think, was up there. Roxy, if we could do that again. What is the best and easiest way for people to reach out? Well, that email, dsawyer at saferplacesinc.com. But of course, our phone number, we're a small company. We pick up the phone. You will not get voicemail. Nice. We will answer. So that's 508-947-0600. One more time. 508-947-0600. Fantastic. David, it's been really good having you on the show. I really appreciate you carving out the time. Hey, thanks for having me. This went by very quickly. It was a lot of fun. It does. It always does. And I enjoy it. I hope you did too. Listen, good. Thanks. And thanks for everybody for listening and watching. This is a show about business and often business challenges. If you've got concerns about the growth of your company, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn at Winning Business Radio. You can drop me a note if you want, kevin@winningbusinessradio.com. Our company is Winning Incorporated. We're part of Sandler Training. We develop sales teams into high achievers and sales leaders into true coaches and mentors. Hey, we're not right for everybody, but maybe we should have a conversation. That's our show for today. Thank you, Roxy, for another great show. We'll be back at it again next Monday, January 17th, 4 p.m. Eastern. My guest will be Steve Lashansky, coach, consultant, speaker, founder, and CEO of Optimize International, and Amazon #1 best-selling author. His latest book is Leadership Starts Here. That's going to be a good one. Until then, this is Kevin Hallinan.
You've been listening to Winning Business Radio with your host, Kevin Hallinan. If you missed any part of this episode, the podcast is available on Talk4 Podcasting and iHeartRadio. For more information and questions, go to winningbusinessradio.com or check us out on social media. Tune in again next week and every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time to listen live to Winning Business Radio on W4CY Radio, W4CY.com. Until then, let's succeed where others have failed and win in business with Kevin Hallinan and Winning Business Radio.